Hello everyone, my name is Tactical, and today we're doing a end of the year tier list with all of the tier 10 vehicles in the game as of update 7.5 with my good friend Beans.
Hello there.
He's here. Okay, so we're just gonna go straight into it. We've got our 5 basic tiers here. We have the straight busted tier for a tank that probably needs a nerf, and then we got the very strong, which are tanks that are used in tournaments and stuff like that. Got your average tier 10, and then you have something that needs a buff, and then something that's just unsalvageable at this point. So we're gonna go in the order. We've already sorted it. We're gonna go in order of appearance in the game. So like we'll start with the lightest vehicle in the First Nation. So light, medium, heavy tank destroyer for the Americans, Germans, Russians, etc. So let's start with the Sheridan. So I know you haven't played the Sheridan, but what do you think of the Sheridan as a whole?
Well, I think it's quite a versatile tank. I mean, you have not only the mobility, but then that kind of troll kind of armor that you have whenever people try to load in their hash rounds.
I'm putting it there right now just so we can move it around a bit. This will be the default. So as a light tank, compared to the other light tanks, it has that really high alpha, and as well for the size of the gun, it will almost always hit its shots. And I'm thinking with the most recent buff to it, removing the missiles made the heat shell way better, and the heat shell is almost as fast as the APCR shell. I would put it up here, but because it's been in the game for so long, people have gotten used to it, but it'll still get troll bounces. The rear part of the space armor still does its bits, and it's just overall, it has a little bit too much armor for a light tank, but that's fine. So we're going to move on now to the M60, which also just got a buff. Your classic American medium, tier 10 degrees of gun depression, very solid, but they buffed the upper plate, right?
Yeah, the actual hull went up, so if you're now using your full gun depression, it can reliably bounce.
So its armor was pretty solid anyway. I think the armor is actually better than the standard pattern, especially on the hull now. But whenever I don't have an M60 sadly, but whenever I fight M60s, their broadside is just so tall because of how compact the tank is along the. It's kind of like squat, but because it's so squished from the front to back, it's rather tall, especially around the engine deck. Like the engine deck sticks out really tall wise. So once it's broadside, you have so much armor to hit. So I would stick it with the Sheridan because of the armor buffs, but it's just kind of your average tier 10 medium, and I'd say right now the Patton is subpar, just below it, because of the lack of hull armor. Yes, it can go hull down, but the STB can do that better. The STB is just a better Patton. So anyway, heavies, tier T57 heavy. What do you think of this 57 heavy?
I think that it's quite strong, actually. And it still is. I wouldn't say it's straight busted, because if you don't know what you're doing, you're gonna find yourself caught out in the open and torn apart. But the fact that you can dump out your shells in quick succession is beautiful.
Yeah, combined, its armor is not the best, its speed's not the best, the 50B is faster, and the Kronwagen has more armor, but the deciding factor for the 57 heavy and why we're putting it up in the top, well not the top, but the A tier is because the fact that it can dump out that really big clip really quickly, and its gun is very accurate, even after like swinging around the turret because of how low the dispersion values are. And where do you want to stick the E5? I want to stick the E5 up here right off the bat, just because, honestly, what do you think of that?
I have been seeing it a lot more in like raiding battles and in tier 10 tourneys.
I'm not. I was just thinking about it, but the thing about the E5 is it has really good hull armor, especially hull down. The turret has weak spots on the cheeks, but they're more of a bait than anything. Yes, you can hit them, but they're so tiny, and if you're wiggling back and forth, you're just gonna like eat the shot with your mantlet. But if it had let's just say stronger side armor, I'd definitely put it in straight busted, but I think very strong is a good spot for it. And the E6 is just a lesser armored, more maneuverable version of the E5. So I'm just gonna stick it one tier below. Here we go. So E4, bam, E3 there. Now this is why I'm saying this. The E3, what I did, all the tier 10s that I've had, I've been playing them a lot prior to this. The E3 is, its armor profile is the most insane armor profile in this tier. Because the Cupola is a bait, the Cupola is almost impenetrable. The Mantlet will eat HE shells where they don't even splash you. And the lower plate, if you reverse onto a, if you actually reverse up and show the top of your tank, your lower plate becomes, becomes very powerful. So I think that's straight busted right now. But now that I'm mentioning it, it's very slow on the turning. But then again, it's once it gets in that hold down position, it's so powerful. And even if someone's Circle of Deathing you, it has that engine speed boost now. So it can kind of turn with you. So I'm going to stick it up there. And I'm sticking the E4 here because the Cupola on the E4 is not a bait like the E3's. The E4's Cupola gets penned left, right, and center. The turret cheeks are weak. Yes, it has a turret, but when you turn the turret to the side, your entire side of your hull is exposed. Honestly, putting it in the bin doesn't mean it's a horrible tank. It's just not as good as every other tank that we've mentioned so far. Every other tank would perform better than the E4. Now, I'm not saying that the E4 is impossible to, like, this is all, take a step back for a second. This tier list is just about every tank can carry, right? It just requires a very, like, it requires to be much more situational and a much better player than it would be in, let's just say, an E3. It's just better. But now that I'm talking about it more, I think because it has that turret, it can engage vehicles on a wider range than the E3 can. So I don't think we're going to have anything in the bin currently. So you have anything to say on that? Does that sound good?
I think it sounds pretty good because if you already have the E3, getting the E4, unless you're a more experienced player and you're making the most use out of your turret, you would rather much go for the one that's more heavily armored and arguably has better outcomes.
Yep. So all in all, American tanks, they've got a good spread of balanced and decent. So let's hit up the German tanks. So start with the Leopard. So I want to stick the Leopard along with the M60. It has very solid DPM now, and the gun is laser beam like. If it had armor, it's straight busted. But the fact that it has 0 armor, and everyone's your side and rear are HEable, and even your turret, yes, you might eat a shell with the edge of your mantlet, but people could just shoot you in the face and pen you. And because of that speed, people get that speed can work for you and against you. You can use it to get out of position, but you could also use it to get into trouble a little quicker than you'd want to. Because I would stick it up in very strong, but you never see Leos in tournaments because of the lack of armor it has. So I think that works. What do you think?
Because of the many large caliber guns, and especially with the recent addition with the auto reloading tank, the Rampon, you're finding that your hit points start to evaporate very quick.
As with most mediums and lights now in the current meta, heavies are kind of dominating the meta anyway. As you look at the tier list right now, all of the heavies we put in so far are very strong. Or in the E6's case, the E6 is more of a medium than anything else. So the real heavies are both rather strong at this point. So just tell me where you should stick the E50M, because I know you play the E50M a lot more than I do.
I would stick it in subpar now.
Yep.
My rationale at this point is the fact that, like, the lightweights, they're kind of buff-ish. The E50M used to be in a good state, but now you can't really fight toe-to-toe without bullying the mediums as much as you did in previous meta.
Yeah, as mediums have gotten a lot of buffs. 62A got a big buff a while back with the gun depression. The Leopard got the DPM buff. We've had 2 new light tanks introduced, and over time the E50M's armor just kind of stopped working. The side armor was pretty bad as it is, and the upper plate's strong, but in a hold down position, you can still, if the turret armor, you can shoot heat at it and it'll pen. And to avoid that, you'd want to go back and forth rather than forward backward, kind of like reversing back and forth to avoid getting turret shot. But that just kind of removes the effectiveness of your upper plate. And it's not nearly as bad as the armor of the Leopard. it doesn't get HE'd, but it can get heshed. But it's just it's not nearly as maneuverable as the leopard. Yes, it's fast, but it's just it's basically just a leopard with lower overall characteristics and a really strong upper plate. And that's really it. And it's in a really awkward position. So I think that's pretty solid. So E100, just your classic. Nothing's great about it. It's just got your very rather accurate boomstick of a gun, a lot of armor, but not enough armor to be impenetrable. Average speed, everything about it is just average. And your armor gets turned off when people load heat or any other like high penning gold round. So I think average is about good for it. What do you think?
I think average is a fair assessment because of that high roll gun that you have on the heavy tank with your kind of super heavy chassis. You can still do a lot of the bounces, but as you said, if you're fighting against more experienced players, they can either just load the gold and shoot into your lower or into your cheeks, and it negates that completely.
Yep. And now the mouse is just a better variant of the E100, not because it's because it's much easier to mount shots with it. It has more health. The armor makes a little more sense. The lower plate's a lot smaller. The turret is actually angleable to a point where you can bounce shots reliably. The gun doesn't have as high of an alpha, but the reload is almost 5 seconds shorter than the E100's reload. And basically, it allows you to get out 2 more shells per minute than the E100 does. And the fact with the mouse used to be here, but now that they've increased the HP, it's changed the mouse entirely.
Fair assessment. The gun, as it has a bit lower on the alpha, but in regards to its armor, it's much more reliable than your E100. And mobility.
Okay, remember how I said that we probably wouldn't have anything in the bin? I lied.
No.
The VK72 is such a hard vehicle to play because it's just, imagine an E100, but you can't side scrape and you don't have as much gun depression. Because it's rear turreted, you think, oh, it can side scrape. The entire side of the turret is weak. Its side armor is probably heshable, and the upper plate, yes, it's almost impenetrable, but high penning rounds will just go right through the lower plate. And a Kronwagen with heat, if you're trying to face hug in a VK72 against a Kronwagen, or an IS-4, or anything with like a really good heat round, all they have to do is look down and they can pen your upper plate. And if you want a big German heavy tank with a 640 Alpha gun, just get the E100. Like, that's all you gotta do.
I mean, as you mentioned, the side armor, where the turret, it actually sits on top of this kind of rounded area on the hull. So if you actually just aim dead on, you can just go right through it whenever it tries to side scrape. So that's why you often try to see players not actually using that. Otherwise, they'll wonder, oh my gosh, how come they're penning me? Well, it's quite apparent.
So, and here, this is what the VK72 should have been. The VK90, which is just the exact same thing with a mouse gun, so the same mouse alpha, but when it's side scraping, it's literally impenetrable. Because it's rear turreted, but it doesn't have any like side nook and crannies like the VK72 does. It can side scrape, and it just works. And the turret cheeks not only are they extremely powerful, but they're so tiny. And on top of that, if you have to side scrape on your cupola side, the cupola is still extremely powerful. And then while you're side scraping, your gun depression goes up to 10 over the side. And not only that, your upper plate's rather powerful, so if you need to go hold down, you can. And on top of that, it has German heavy tank health points. It has only 200 less than the mouse. So this is when a pay-to-win tier would be necessary, because this tank's only been sold for a lot of money. So I think that's fair. I
wouldn't have questioned it. There's not really much to add to it, because we are pretty much told every negative aspect about the VK previously that this just doesn't have. I'm
not salty about not being able to fight VK90s. I'm just stating the obvious. Alright, now we got 2 more German tank destroyers here. I'm gonna chuck the Jaegeru here, and I'll tell you why. Actually, no, I think you know why. Go ahead.
I mean, you take the E100, put a bigger gun on it, take away the turrets, and just now you can't angle it. They just load the gold to go straight through it. Your mobility isn't the greatest, and just with the constant shift of the game, you're not going to be able to get to where you need to and put down the damage before, say, the mediums come around and start shooting you in the side. It's just not as good.
The game at the moment has kind of 2 niches. You have the highly maneuverable medium tanks on one flank, and then you have the heavies on the other flank. The VK can't really go either way. If the VK goes with the mediums, yes, it might get 2 shots off, but it's just going to get peppered to death and then flanked. If it goes with the heavies have enough pen to just negate the armor on the casemate. And on the Jaegeru, it has a pretty chunky forehead. Like, if you're looking down, people can still nick the edge of your tank and you can't even see them. And like, if you're a Jaegeru having to fight like a Kranwagen on a hill, on a ridgeline, the Kranwagen is just gonna pepper you to death with heat, and the only thing you can do is fire HE at it every 15 seconds. And yes, the gun itself is like S tier gun, but the rest of the tank is just, it needs work. If I were to do anything to it to make it average or better, I wouldn't buff the armor, because if you buff the upper casemate and make it immune to heat shells, which is the main weakness, it'd be way too powerful. I think what it needs is it needs better traverse speed. That's what it needs. Just maybe like by like 2 to 2.5 to 5 degrees, and that would make it at least average, or like somewhere in between. So for right now, it's just gonna sit in subpar. All right, now we got the grill, which everyone loves the grill. Not everyone, but everyone knows, because when they see a grill, they're like, ooh, damage. But when you're playing the grill, the gun is the only thing that you get the tank for, and the gun performs. But everything else about it is you're gonna get HE to death. And when I say that, it's actually a good thing, because when people are spamming HE at you, yes, they might pen you and do more damage, but sometimes they might hit your track, or in a lot of people's cases, if a 183 shoots you in the face, it'll hit the tip of your gun barrel for a 0. And I can't put it in very strong because it doesn't have any armor. But right now, it's just kind of a very nice, good, all-around tank destroyer. Not all-around, but it's a very good tank destroyer if you're looking for the gun. But the camo is atrocious, and you have to sit super far back to not get spotted. But the accuracy allows you to do that. Especially if you're on like a cap on Canal, you can just dominate. So, yeah. I
think sticking in an average tier is also quite good, because the main selling point of this one is that gun. Your reload's quite good, your pen is beautiful, and the damage you deal lets people feel it. And then in the other regards, you just lose out on your mobility, you lose out on the armor, but in a tank destroyer, it's not really things that you're necessarily looking for.
Alright, well that rounds off the German tanks, and more so than the Americans, it has an even wider distribution, more leaning towards the lower end of the spectrum. You got one top tier, and then the rest of them are average or less. So let's move on to the Russian mediums. So let's shove the 140 and the 62A out here first. So the 62A is just a better 140, because the 62A has better turret armor, less hull armor. The 140 has better hull armor, less turret armor. And they buff the 62A's gun depression to a point where it can go hull down much more often. And the 140, because of its bad turret armor, it can't go hull down. But the thing is, a 140 against other mediums, it's very strong against other mediums, but when it has to flank, and if it has to like try and like hold down against a big gun staring at it, the big gun's just going to shoot it in the face and probably overmatch the roof armor. So if there was a tier between average and subpar, I'd stick it there. So we're just going to stick it high up in subpar.
I would still stick it kind of more into the average than into the subpar, just primarily because regardless of whether you pick the 140 or the 62A, they're still Russian mediums, and if you can learn to drive them, you're gonna find that the playstyle is quite in between, and it's good to learn on. I wouldn't say that it's terrible to hit.
Alright, so now we got the third Russian medium. Busted. Its turret armor is better than the 62A and the 140s to a point where even loading heat can't pen the same weak spots that you can on the 62A and the 140. The whole hull is much less like overall profile to hit, and sideways half the time if you're a lower caliber gun you just don't do any damage. Is that fair?
That is very fair.
If there was a tier above straight busted called T22 Russian bias, it would go there. Honestly, I might shove the it above both for now, because I don't think like this is the pinnacle of tankery right here. It's got the really good gun, it's got the great mobility, it's got really solid armor, even against 183s. So yeah, still on Russian tanks. So let's go to the Russian heavies. We got the IS-7 and the IS-4. So then the IS-4, it's definitely gonna go up there. Yeah, there isn't any ranking in the tiers itself. There's no like, oh, this is like a top very strong, but this is like, it's the very strong. There's no like lesser very strong or like more so strong. It's just once you get in that tier, everyone's equal once you get in that tier. So the IS-4 is just, you know, it's a good tournament tank. It's got good health. It can over angle side scrape and still be effective. It's just overall very strong. The IS-7, everyone shits on the IS-7, and I don't know why. Because the IS-7's armor is like so noob proof, it's not even funny. Like the side armor, even broadside can bounce shots because of that giant chunk of spaced armor up there. Hold down, the pike nose does wonders. And even frontally, some mediums have to load heat to pen the lower plate. And I know some people who would throw it here and say it needs work. And I would say yes, it needs work. It needs a traverse speed buff, but everything else about it, it's pretty solid. Honestly, I kind of want to stick it up there, but because of the slow traverse speed, that's what makes it really bad. That's what makes it worse than the IS-4. So now we got the tank destroyers, the 263 and the 268. 268, 263. There we go. So the 263, as much as it pains me to say it, I think I'm gonna keep it in average. I was about to stick it in subpar, but it's too noob proof to be in subpar. It's got the best DPM in tier 10 currently. It is very maneuverable for a tank destroyer, or any tank, mind you. It can stick with mediums pretty well, and it has a very nice armor on the upper plate and the upper casemate. But what kills it is people can just load gold and shoot it in the mantlet, and the side armor is non-existent. So if you over angle even slightly, you're getting penned.
It's a pretty solid tank if you're looking to into the Russian line and you're wanting that kind of good mobility and a good gun. Yeah, definitely. We're not going to say it's very strong, just say it's pretty average.
And what kills it is it's 4 degrees of gun depression. It has no gun depression at all, which makes it really hard to like go find good hold down positions with it. Now the 268, we got our first tank destroyer on the very strong list. And I'm gonna say that because it's like, just take an E3, give it a bit more, give it better gun handling and more speed, but cut down on the armor. If you angle the 268 right, you can get bounces. The gun, you can whip your tank around and click on someone from 200 meters away and it'll hit. Because it's just the dispersion values are so solid, and the aim time it's almost zeroed in almost all the time anyway. And it's just a classic 152. So the exact same playstyle up. It basically from tier 6 and beyond, it's the exact same playstyle. Which I'll get into tech tree playstyles in a second with later tank, but Would you lower it down or raise it up anywhere?
I wouldn't raise it up because, as you said, that armor you do still have to be somewhat mindful.
Yeah, you just definitely still have to work on the armor. The armor is not impervious like the E3's is. So that wraps up the Russians, which are we got 4 very strong and beyond, and only 2 in average or less. So the Russians, it's a Russian-made game. I didn't expect much better than this. So let's work on let's take a gander for one of the newer tanks that was added, the British Vickers Light. Now, as of this update, it was nerfed from... Oh, that's the wrong vehicle. What? It was nerfed from this to this. And all they did was nerf the pen and nerf the turret armor. Because before, when it was chilling up here, if you hit the mantlet, it would bounce. And because it was so quick, wiggling around back and forth and going 65 kilometers an hour all over the place, you would hit that mantlet a lot of the time and not damage it. It's the same kind of funky armor like the T22. The weak spots are there, but it's just really hard to hit. But now that they've nerfed the armor, it's there now.
It's still a very good tank, and you still see it in tourneys as a good kind of scouting vehicle. However, it's not as prevalent or as dominant as it used to be.
Yeah, you can never. It's still, the armor is still kind of there against light tanks, but you can't hate on view range. No one really thinks about view range being a deciding factor, but the Vickers Light can outspot like everything, and it's kind of nuts how well it can spot without being spotted back because of that on-move light tank camo. But I think it's pretty solid right there. Let's go to the British Medium, the 4202. I think we got. I kind of want to shove it in subpar, but because of the hesh it gets, I'm gonna keep it up in average.
I kind of want to bring it back down to subpar because unless you know what you're doing with your hash, you're not going to be very effective with it. And especially when we've been keeping the idea of like newer players, they're just gonna try and load us, and then they're gonna get frustrated because this tank really needs to make use of
the hash and being able to aim it and knowing where weak spots are before, because you want to just quickly poke out and shoot. You don't want to poke and then look around. Oh, where can I pen the hash, right? You need to know prior to even exposing your tank where you're where you're gonna shoot. And it doesn't help that the only armor that works is the upper plate. Against, let's just say you're fighting like the lowest pen in tier 10. I don't know what that is, but let's just say you're fighting that. The forehead of your tank will ricochet, and the bottom turret ring will ricochet. But where your gun pops out, everything will pen it right where the gun is. And I'm not moving it around anymore, but another funny thing is the cupola is actually really armored. And if you try and shoot the cupola, you might end up ricocheting off because of all the spaced armor bits on top. That's enough about the 4202. Let's go on to the FV. I have started to really like the FV, but I'm not gonna let my my liking for the tank change my mind at the fact that it's a subpar vehicle. Because yes, it has turret armor, which is very nice. The gun is a laser beam with rather good DPM, and the fact that it has access to all the new consumables like the speed boost and reactive armor and stuff. That doesn't change the fact that the armor is piss poor, and it's rear turreted, so you think, oh, I can side scrape. You have to side scrape at like an almost flat angle. If you stick your butt out at all, you're getting penned. Because it's the exact same weak spot as the VK72. It's got that weird bulge by the turret. So I'm gonna keep it there. I know you played the FE4202 and the FE215B as well, so what do you think about that?
Before, I would have definitely stuck it between average and very strong. But at this stage, with so many other tanks you could choose to play, it doesn't perform as it probably should. I mean, yes, if you can make the gun work and your turret, you'll be fine. But you need to know what you're doing, because otherwise, as you said, the whole armor kind of like after it goes to tracks, it kind of has that kind of weird kind of sloping thing, and then inwards, and then displays outward, and
It's the
that's
same
just
bulge as the VK72. So let's talk about the. I just realized there are more premium tier 10 heavies than there are tech tree. There's the Super Conk and the Chieftain. So I'm going to shove the Super Conqueror and the Chieftain. They're both going to sit right here in average. Because the Chieftain, it's kind of like the 4202 in the way is if you have a really high penning gun, like if you're in an E3 or a Su-68 or a 183 or anything like that, you just shoot it dead in the gun and it'll pen. As well as you can, high penning HE shells can pen the cupola. Your side armor is non-existent and the lower plate's pretty thick. But the Super Conqueror though, I might, nope, not there. I might bump it up to very strong because it's just a Chieftain with really good hold down capabilities. Like I'm talking god-like hold down capabilities. Your upper plate has those big chunks of spaced armor along it, and it has not as accurate or as fast reloading gun as the Chieftain, but it still hits just as hard. So I think that works pretty well. I'm pretty sure avid Super Conqueror drivers would say, oh god, the Super Conqueror is not as good as you think, because I haven't gotten the Super Conqueror yet. But what I've seen, and when I fight Super Conquerors, when they're hold down, it's just crazy. And they can kind of sort of side scrape. Kind of sort of. The same kind of sort of as the FV215B, but the FV215B can't go hold down, so. How does that sound?
See, it's one of those things where I think like if we had like a separation between very strong and average, it would sit right there and be perfectly fine. I think it's fine where it is, though.
We could do that. Oh, not that.
Could, but
never mind. It's fine.
Are we gonna do that right now?
Nah. So now you'd think, oh, hold down E3 is top of the tree right now, right? And you think of Badger, which is, it looks like it'd be up here, right? Wrong. It has the same strengths as the E3, yes. But what kills it is it's so much slower than the E3 is. And it's so unforgiving. The second you get like if someone were to overexpose themselves on a ridgeline, the Badger doesn't hit nearly as hard as the E3 does, and the Badger's lower plate you can't really angle it like you can with the E3. The E3, if you wiggle back and forth just a second to the right and left, the lower plate is very hard to hit and pen reliably because of the really strong armor on the lower plate. But the Badger is just kind of fat, and yes, it's situational, but it's not as carryable as it is with the E3. Maybe if they gave the Badger the improved speed boost, it'd probably bump up with the Super Conqueror. But at the current state in the game, it's kind of bad.
You don't see too many of them out on the battlefield anyway.
Even after it being sold for cheap. So we're almost at the ends of the British here. We have the 183 and the Poop Barn. So I'm gonna shove the 183 in subpar, and the yeah, I think that looks pretty good.
Yeah, because the 183, everyone is looking to see, oh my gosh, I'm gonna get hit by this huge whopping shell. But aside from that one hit, it just doesn't really perform after that. Whereas your as you call it, the Poop Barn, you still have maneuverability and you have that kind of like really quick gun, and it's nice comparatively speaking.
With the consumables that it has that crazy boost. It has Spall Liner, so that the fact that its turret has no armor doesn't really hinder the vehicle. And the clip it has, once you pen all three of your clipping shots, it has higher alpha than the 183 does. But the 183 can do it all in one go. And here's a funny thing. I'm tempted to bring the Poop Barn down a bit here. And here's why. The entire tech tree has high alpha. Good, it's just the same, the Charioteer, the Challenger, the Conway, they really high alpha with like 8 to 12 second reload in between, right? So you can expose, you shoot once and retreat. And then once you hit the tier 10, the playstyle changes because now you have to sit in front of people for about 6 seconds if you want to do your whole clip. So if we're treating the whole clip as one bullet, it has the same playstyle. But you have to also have the skills of playing autoloaders on top of the fact of playing this line in particular for it being so tall and having such bad armor. But yeah, because of the unforgivingness of that, I'm gonna keep it down to subpar.
I'll agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like a fair assessment.
So, and now the best light tank in tier 10. The Bat Chat, the first ever tier 10 light tank, the tank that Wargaming said we're never adding another tier 10 light tank to, proceeds to add the Sheridan and Vickers Light to. It got buffed. It got a slightly shorter interclip reload. So now it's halfway between your classic 3-second interclip and your 57 heavy 2.5-second interclip, which buffed the DPM a lot and allowed it to put its clip out a bit faster, which is why I'm going to shove it up here with the Sheridan. Yes, it doesn't have it. It actually, now that I'm thinking about it, all of the tier 10 light tanks right now have troll armor, because the Bat Chat, when using its gun depression, yes, the turret is paper, but the upper plate is an auto ricochet zone, and if people are auto aiming on you, they'll hit that and they'll bounce you. I can't tell you how many times people will be driving at an angle and you'll try and shoot for their track wheel and your bullet will go a bit too high to one side and it'll hit the upper plate and fly off into the distance and you get clipped out and die. So that's why I'm shoving it in very strong. If they gave it a 2.5-second interclip, it's definitely there. But they buffed it enough to leave the average. So I think very strong is a good spot for the Bat Chat right now.
So the thing about the Bat Chat is its gun and its mobility. It can zip around, dump its shells, and then hide behind like a little cliff face. And anytime someone tries to shoot at you, as you said, that upper plate just bounces off shells left, right, and center.
Not nearly as often as a Vickers Mantlet or a Sheridan Space Armor, but it's good enough. This is coming from the same tech tree where the tier 9's armor is so paper, when you load HE, there's no orange. It's just pennable everywhere. So the fact that it has a good upper plate is solid. So let's get the Collector tier 10 French medium. I'm gonna shove it down here. Because
What is it?
I want to put it there because, yes, it has a good mantlet, but have you seen that giant tumor of a cupola? And what I have noticed while playing it and while fighting it, the fuel tanks die and set you on fire all the time, to a point where I was tempted to drop adrenaline for the fire extinguisher. Like, there was one battle where I was fighting a 50B. The first shell kills the fuel tank. Second shell sets me on fire. I fix the fire. And then the third shell sets me on fire again. This is all while I thought I was hull down using my mantlet armor. It's just that the armor is so condensed into one spot that when you're caught out of position, it just doesn't perform nearly as well as any other medium tank would. Like, if it was a Russian medium, it would be able to have as like the upper plate armor, or it'd be able to like it's not only, it's a little smaller as well, and the 30B's butt is, and the sides are also very high explosivable, and they're a 183's dream to shoot, especially if they're hot out of position. Not saying it's a bad tank, I probably would keep it an average, but just because of the bad experiences I've had playing it and while fighting them, it's just, I'm gonna keep it in subpar.
The few games that I've played in my E50M as of recently, when I played against it, I just ended up bullying it, being completely wrong. Because even though, as you said, it has that kind of mantlet armor, if anything has a degree of accuracy, it will hit either directly into that cupola, or if I can just get to its side, I just load in HE and it's not a good time.
Yeah, the tier 9 variant of this tank doesn't have the cupola, and it has a big chunk of space armor running along the entire upper part of the hull, making it not able to be HE'd on the side. So this tank is it suffers, and I kind of feel bad for putting it there, but I don't. It's fine, it can stay there. So we've got a few more Frenchies left. We've got the 50B, which is the second Clipper tier 10 armor list, which is basically just a 57 heavy with much more gun depression, same amount of gun handling, a bit slower clip reload, but the thing that makes the 50B work so well and why I'm sticking it in the very strong is the speed that it has, the very troll frontal hull armor it has, and the fact that it has that gun depression. It can, because of its speed, it can run with mediums, and it can run a medium over so quickly. Because if the medium's not ready for it, that's 1200 damage in 6 seconds. And it can kind of like, if it face hugs, it can kind of like get a couple bounces off if they're not aiming up. But it has glaring weaknesses of the fact that of its entire side and rear armor profile, HE loves to pen that, and it's so big. It's almost, I think it's as tall as a mouse. Not nearly the same whole profile as a mouse, but the same overall height. So I have a soft spot for the 50B, but overall, I think average is a good spot to shove it.
I think keeping it in the average is kind of a good idea as well, because when you're comparing it to the T57 heavy, which a lot of the times you will be, when you're looking at the difference of playstyle, because with the heavy you're going to run with the T57 heavy, you're going to run that with the heavies and provide them that higher power support. But with the AMX 50B, you kind of can't do that unless you're trying to bait out shots with your lower plate. I mean, not lower plate, with your hull armor at an angle, but then you also have these kind of like weird side flaps, which are poorly armored, and some tank destroyers can HE pen that.
It's not like most tanks where the part of the tank that's over top of the tracks isn't part of the armor profile. It's just some metal sheeting. In the 50B, that part over the tracks is part of the tank, so it's very HEable on that spot, which also makes the rear armor very wide. But yeah, average is a good spot to stick it. And now we have the brand new tier 10 AMX MLE. We're shoving that in straight busted. Actually, no. Straight busted's a bit too much. I'm talking straight busted would be before it got reworked, because before, in its current state, its turret armor frontally is literally impenetrable, and the cupola is extremely small. The tank is tall, so if you're trying to face hug it, you can't hit the cupola. The upper plate's very powerful, and the side armor is not as weak as you'd think it would be. But the lower plate is kind of big, and on flat terrain, if it has no cover, you will pen its lower plate. So I think very strong, somewhere between very strong and straight busted is a good spot to shove it. But before when it had 180 millimeters of side armor, this is post. This is pre-rework and this is post pre-work.
The mobility, the gun, and the armor on this tank is very strong, and I would recommend anyone, if you're looking at any French heavy tank, not when I say heavy tank, I mean a tank that can actually frontline, this is the thing that you want to be thinking about. Unfortunately, you can only get it in the
for lots of money. If you pay Wargaming a lot of money, you can get it now. So, and now we have our last Frenchie, the Foch, and I'm gonna shove it there because even after nerfing the alpha damage, it has a lot of armor for what it is. Even loading premium shells with a medium or a light tank or even some heavies, your upper plate, even on flat terrain, is still very powerful. Your cupola, you have two of them. One of them is a complete bait, and the other cupola, if you hit too far up, down, or to the sides of the cupola, it gets eaten by auto ricochet zones and spaced armor. The gun is just as well handling as this 268, and it's very, very fast. So I'm definitely putting the Foch in straight busted, and there's nothing that Wargaming can do to nerf it without completely breaking the tank and making it horrible to play. Because it has all these good things about it, but if you were to nerf any one of them, it just breaks down the whole thing it has going for it. So how does that sound?
It sums it up quite nicely. It has all the things going just right to make it pretty much unbreakable.
You can't say, oh, the side armor is bad. Any tank that gets caught out broadside is bad. We're talking in an actively engaging position, not when it's trying to run away. And this tank can run away better than any other tank destroyer in the game right at the current moment. Because if the Grille tries to run, it's way too tall, and the camo's way worse. Same with the FV. The 183 is too slow, Badger's too slow, Jaegeru's too slow. It's just an overall like perfectly rounded tank destroyer. So that rounds out the Frenchies, and the Frenchies are kind of like the Russians, and they've got one in each. And look at that, we've got one tank from each nation in straight busted, except for Britain.
The British.
Thank you for making balanced tanks, Britain. Appreciate that. All right, now let's jump into the two Japanese tanks. We've got the STB. We'll just do that one first. So I definitely want to shove the STB in straight busted, but it's not as broken as people think it is. Yes, it can go hull down, but even a hull down STB's turret cheeks are still really weak. And when you go hull down, if you angle it wrong, you'll expose your side armor. And it's just like the 50B, the parts over the tracks are part of the tank. So it gets taken out in that way if you overexpend too much. But all in all, it's a very powerful medium, and I definitely would want to shove it in straight busted if it weren't for the balancing factors that it has.
Which is good in this case, because otherwise you would just see a bunch of STBs running around.
So now we're the final stretch here. The Japanese tank destroyer, the Hori. I think it's the same spot as the STB here, because it has a very solid, the best pen in the game right now for its standard ammo. A 10-second reload. So every 10 seconds, it's going to put 560 alpha damage into you, which is a lot. It's rather maneuverable for what it is. It has really troll armor. And the side armor is weak, but it's not weak enough to get HE'd by everything. The only thing you get HE'd by are really high penning HE guns, i.e. the UK. But all in all, it's a very solid vehicle. And I've seen the armor, which when you look at it and with a good tank destroyer gun, you're like, oh, I'll just shoot at it, and then you shoot it and your bullet disappears into some weird nook that the tank has, because it has the lower and upper part of the lower plate will bounce stuff. Half of the upper plate has this really weird thick spaced machine gun port, which will eat your shots. The mantlet and the area around the mantlet will eat your shots, and without heat or really good APCR shells, you're not going to be able to pen the upper casemate. So I think that's a good spot to shove the Hori as well.
The Hori is kind of like you take the gun from the Grille, but then you put it on like an E100, but then you just boost up its mobility and its armor just a little bit, and you kind of have an overall better experience.
So it's got the same gun handling and maneuverability as a Grille, but on the hull style of a Jaegeru. That's pretty much what it is. So now we're going to move on to the European tech tree. So we got the only Swedish heavy tank in this tier, the Kranvagn. And I would shove it up there in straight busted, but what really kills this tank at the moment, I'm not saying the damage per minute is what's killing it. The damage per minute's fine, and that's what makes it a balanced vehicle. But the fact that it's so slow is definitely what kills it. It's very slow without the speed boost, and its clip is nice, but the entry clip's rather long. And I've definitely missed some killing shots because of the extra 0.5 seconds that I'm not used to with every other clipper in the game.
It's a very strong tank. Don't get us wrong. But the reason why it's not straight busted, as we said, is you need to know and be aware of what targets are in front of you, because you have only so many shells to deal with the reds.
Yeah, you have a limited amount of bullets, and you can't get them back very easily because of how long your reload is. So you have to really choose your targets. And yes, it has really good hold down capabilities, but if you turn the turret even slightly to the left or right, your side becomes a weak spot. So the Italian mediums, which is the exact same systems as the Kronwagen, but just a little bit lower alpha, much better. Basically, just take it's the classic Italian auto reloading, which is a much better auto reloader than what the Kronwagen has, which combined with the extremely sloped hull armor that it has, especially against mediums, that it is a medium, so it fights with the mediums, and the fact that it has that clip potential, and no one can really count, like, oh, it has 2 shells left, and then it fires, and it's like, oh, it has 1 shell left, and then it's like, oh, I can now push him because he has a 15 odd second clip reload. You can never know. It's the uncertainty of the tank that makes me want to shove it up and straight busted.
It's a very good tank, but I feel like it's, even though it is straight busted in a very incapable player's hands, I would still kind of put it in between straight busted and very strong, because then again, if you're not being careful, much like the tier 8 Progetto, it has that different kind of gun. As you said, it's not a straight clipper. You don't pop out, fire your 3 and retreat. You have the flexibility to choose whether you want to try and output your DPM, which is kind of minimal already, or use it as a clip. You need to know where you're aiming as well. It's not straight busted, is what I'm trying to say.
Yep. So now I'm gonna let you position where we're gonna shove the 1-2-1.
Oh man, I have a soft spot for the 1-2-1, purely because of the aiming time and the damage output that it has, that alpha, which most people, you don't expect to be slammed with like 420 every single time, but you, with your HE, you can roll almost up to, I think it's like almost 600,
Almost 600, yeah.
600, yeah. Your turret is very good, especially, and your frontal plate as well, if you can angle it just nicely. The only reason why I would want to put it in very strong is that, well, your cupolas, they're kind of big for what they are, and your mobility isn't the greatest, so that's kind of brings you down a notch. So I want to say I'll keep it at average, actually.
I'd shove it very strong, because for a medium, it's this really weird. It's a medium with a lot of heavy tank aspects. Fighting, what the 1-2-1 does is it shreds other mediums and then goes to flank, because it has that really strong upper plate, really good aim time, where you can just whip your tank a whole 180, sit there for about 2 seconds, and then be able to fire completely accurately. The DPM, you reload almost the exact same as every other medium, but you have 100 something more alpha. The cupolas are there, yes, but every tank has a cupola. And a lot of the times, when you try and fire at the 1-2-1's cupola, your shell will go too low and it'll ricochet off the top of the tank, because the cupolas are positioned so far back on the turret. There's a good amount of space. And for me, what's stopping it from going into straight busted is that the turret cheeks are flat. So if you aim right, you can pen the turret cheeks, and the fact that the side armor is non-existent. If it had like 100, maybe it had like 100 millimeters, or maybe a bit more, maybe a bit less side armor, it'd be up here with the Foch and the T22 medium. But at the current moment, after the alpha buff it and the DPM buff it got, I think very strong is a good spot to stick it. And the 1-2-1B is just a 1-2-1 with a lesser gun, so I'm just gonna stick it there. We don't need to talk about that one that much. So now we got the last three. We've got we have the Chinese IS-7 clone, the 111-5A. Where's our IS-7? Here it is. It's just a Chinese IS-7 with easier to pen. Much easier to pen. What's it called? Pike nose. A much easier to pen pike nose, and cupolas.
Right.
So I know a lot of people have a soft spot for this tank, but I'm really tempted to shove it in almost subpar. Because yeah, it has that nice big alpha gun, but the whole armor, and it has the weak spots that the cupola does. It can't side scrape that well. It can't side scrape and engage opponents like an IS-4 can. Because if it side scrapes and tries to engage, when it goes to engage, it gets pinned in the pike nose. So I don't think subpar is doing it justice. So I think average will be a good spot to shove it.
Yes. What if you're very used to the tier 9 of the Chinese heavy tanks? It's just like that, but at tier 10, your damage goes up, and keeping it at the average is kind of a good place for it. The gun's great, the mobility is there, but as you said, the armor is kind of it's not all there because you don't have side armor, and because of how flat it is in that kind of like delta shape, anyone that is slightly off center or dead on will go through it.
Now we have the Tech Tree Chinese heavy tank, the 113, which I'm putting it in very strong, even though it has even worse traverse than the IS-7. The side armor doesn't work. The upper plate doesn't work. It has really bad turret traverse. Its turret isn't very strong. What makes it so darn good is the insane damage output it has. It can, in a 1 versus 1, it can kill any medium or any heavy it damn well pleases. I'm pretty sure a mouse versus a 1-2-1, a 1-2-1 would probably win. Because every time the mouse fires, the 1-2-1 puts 2 probably into the mouse for only 40 less alpha damage. So even though I personally hate playing the vehicle, fighting it, you get, if you caught out, you're getting shredded. And with that health buff it got, along with all the other heavies, that's what kind of broke it for me. If it had less HP, it's definitely going with the 5A. But the fact that it has such good damage per minute is why I'm putting it in very strong.
Funnily enough, this was one of the first tier 10 tanks that I really sunk my teeth into, and I really enjoy it because it's very strong in the sense that you wouldn't put it at the front line, but if you put it beside your other heavies, it provides such a beautiful support role. You can not only deal damage, but you can also kind of like bait people with that kind of frontal play, because it's all one surface pretty much.
It's also very, very angled. Even though the armor itself isn't that much, it's very well angled. So quick, like little bumps, like if you hit like a rock and you bump up just a smidgen, it changes your effectiveness so much because of how angled it is based. And we are here, the final tank, the box. Where are we going to put the box? Because
straight bust, immediate.
100% straight busted. Okay, that's all, folks. I hope you. No, but the thing about the box tank is the driver is what makes the tank. If you're a bad player, it's going to the bin. If you have any amount of brain and you know how your armor profile works, it's busted. Because it's just like, it has the same amount of gun. It's the same reasoning why the Foch is so high up. It's not as fast as a Foch. Its armor works a little bit better than a 268. But the fact is, if you turn away slightly, like if you're not dead on to your opponents, your side armor becomes extremely weak. If you look at it right here, you can see there's a bit of a lip right there. If you show any amount of that to the enemy, they're gonna pen it. But I've seen, and I've become a victim of this. People can bait that. You'll kind of start reversing away and show your side, and then quickly just turn back to engage them, and then they'll fire a bit too late, and they'll hit your upper plate for nothing. But I can't say, oh, the upper plate's so bad against heat. Any tank's armor turns off when you load gold. Every tank's armor turns off when you load gold, except for the E3, which is why it's still up there. But yeah, I think very strong is a good spot to stick it, but I might bring it down to average.
The cannon's good for what it is. The armor, as you said, is probably well, the combination of the armor and its traverse gives it that edge. So if there was an in between, it would be between average and very strong, I think. But if you're not careful, you'd literally throw that tank in the bin.
Yeah. If you didn't know how to use the armor and know who to engage, because if you learn like, oh, this tank's premium pen is insane, let's not engage that frontally, right? It's this weird middle ground because it can snipe, but it can't frontline as well. So it's got this weird mid to long range, as with most tank destroyers, except for the E3, which can frontline like no one's business. But yeah, thank you for joining me this late in the night, my friend. I'm glad we were able to put together this completely opinionated, cohesive tier list of all the tier 10 vehicles in the game. And we're definitely going to have to come back to this next year, because we're definitely going to get some more premium tier 10s, and we're definitely getting at least 2 more tech trees. The TVP is coming out soon too, so it's going to be great. So thank you for joining me, my friend, and I will see the rest of you all in the next video. Peace.